Welcome to my 278th video on my work with OO gauge. This video will be a little departure from my usual subject matter. I'll be servicing a couple of models of Canadian diesel engines, actually in HO scale, not OO, from Bachmann. These engines belong to a friend of mine, and he asked me to have a look at them, as they weren't running very well. I live in Canada, have done for nearly 50 years now, but I choose to model chiefly LMS operations in the 1930s, the decade in which my grandfather's career as a driver with the LMS concluded in retirement. Here are the engines as my friend passed them to me, both in their original boxes but one missing the insert. He bought these, he tells me, some 30 years ago to amuse his son, and now he's wanting to run them again to amuse his grandson, the son of the original amusee. And here they are out of their boxes. I'm afraid I'm not even going to get into what prototypes these models are based on. It's just not my area at all. One of the things that I first noticed was how heavy these models were, especially the black one. But the red one is not really a lightweight at 251 grams. Still, the black one is in a totally different class at 539 grams. This is heavier than any other model loco I've worked on, with the single exception of the new Hornby turbo motive, which came in at 588 grams with its tender. I took the models to the bench and tried them with my bench power supply. The red one worked okay with power to the front bogie wheels, but produced no result with power to the back bogie wheels, the rear two of which had traction tyres on them. I've persuaded this guy to run on the rolling road now. Once I figured out he picks up only from the front bogie and drives the back bogie, so the back bogie is actually sort of lifted up on the block there, and he's got his front bogie sitting on rollers to pick up. Well, I suppose I could also hang it out. Hey, this is an alternate way of doing this guy on the rolling road. Since the back bogie drives and the front bogie picks up, you can just put the front bogie on the rails and it can pick up from the rails, and then the back bogie is sitting on some rollers there. But the problem, of course, being a diesel is you can hardly see the wheels turning, because they are turning, but I mean, yeah, you can just about see that they're turning there, but it's, they're masked and there's no valve gear or anything, connecting rods or anything like that, so it's not easy to see. But anyway, frankly, this seems to be running quite well to me, and that's only 50%. I'll try it on a track as well, but I will service it, but it doesn't seem to be in terribly bad state. With the black one, on the other hand, I could get no result at all from applying power to any of the wheels. I took both models down to try them out on my basement layout made using Bachmann Easy Track. So after an initial look at them on the bench, I just brought my friend's Canadian HO gauge trains down to try on my Bachmann layout, the Bachmann engines, and this is Bachmann nickel silver track. Code 100 Easy Track. Now this one seems to me, I would say, basically to run fine. I don't know how much power I've got on it. This is not real, that's about 45%. Yeah, that doesn't seem to me at all an unreasonable speed for a diesel at 40%. And it does have a sort of little light in it, although it's not very bright running at that speed, so it's a bit hard to see, but it is actually working a light. Bit hard to see, as I say, when it's actually running like this. So this is no handheld control, I say, but it stops and starts nice and smoothly. So try and run it backwards. Famous last one. Yeah. Well, it's making a rather strange noise running backwards. Oh, you can see the light better there. It's like I don't know. Yeah, I'm not very happy with that noise it makes going, sorry. Where is it? I'm sorry, I beg your pardon. Lousy camera work here. Yeah, I think we'll stop it there. I'm not wild about that noise it makes going backwards. I suppose it makes a bit of noise going forwards when it comes down to it, but it's more noticeable going backwards. Yeah, it is a bit noisy. And a bit of servicing, a bit of cleaning and lubrication might help to reduce that noise, but the speed's perfectly reasonable. On the other hand, this behemoth of an engine, this big, well, it's not really that enormous, but it weighs a ton, turning the power up famous last words. I did get something. Well, that's really weird, because I was getting absolutely nothing before. Bizarre. Well, he definitely needs more servicing, because that's like about 80% power on this MRC controller, but he is going now. That's really weird. Yeah, he takes a hell of a lot of power. But, I mean, this is an MRC, an American. This is a controller meant for HO trains, really. It's an MRC Tech 2, I think. Well, I thought I was just going to demonstrate this didn't work, because it didn't work before. Bizarre. Let's try it backwards. Well, that's bizarre, but never mind. It needs a lot more power than the other. I can only tell the power by the feel here, because I can't really look at it, but it's about 80% power, but... And it might also... It seems to slow down gradually, so it must have some sort of stay-alive capacitor or something in it. Bit weird. Well, yeah, see, it's very noticeable. I turn the power down to, well, it's either got a whopping great flywheel or some sort of stay-alive capacitor, because it really carries on. It glides to a stop when you cut the power rather than stopping immediately. Of course, the fact that it weighs a ton would help.
Since the red seemed to be running quite well, although only picking up from the front bogie, whilst the black only seemed to run at all rather randomly, I decided to start by servicing the black. I got it back on the bench and tried it again in the sponge. It did now run when I applied power to the wheels, but then it stopped running again. Clearly something was distinctly iffy. I looked at the bottom of the model. The only screws there were on the bogies. There didn't appear to be any clips. I looked at the top of the model and saw this screw near the front. I undid that screw. To my surprise, it proved to be a tiny screw rather than the long body-mounting screw I was expecting. But it was indeed the body-mounting screw, and with that screw removed I was able to lift the body off the chassis. But I couldn't separate body and chassis completely due to the wires for the front light. The wires for the light were soldered, one to the mounting frame and one to the actual bulb itself. And the other ends of those wires were soldered to the motor terminals, so there would be no way to separate the body and chassis without desoldering. I was able to get the motor to run when I applied power directly to the motor terminals, but with power applied to the wheels, I got slower running at best and sometimes nothing. Interesting model, this, actually. I mean, it does have a massive flywheel and a big motor. That's only 50% power, so the motor runs quite well when power is applied directly to the motor. And I don't know whether you can see, but the light is also working there. Sorry. Try not to short circuit here, but yeah, see the light comes on. The other thing that's noticeable, as I said before, is when it's running, because it's got such a massive flywheel, when you cut the power, it glides down very steadily. It doesn't just suddenly stop, because that's a massive flywheel. And this is all metal. You know, it's a solid die-cast chassis. It weighs a ton. Anyway, so it looks, I think the problem is mainly that power is not getting to the motor well. So the pickup arrangement may not be working well and whatever. We'll see. I felt that I needed to proceed with further disassembly, and it seemed that the only obvious next step was to remove the screws on the base of the bogies. With the screw undone, the plastic base of the bogie could be lifted away from the die-cast body of the bogie. Here you can see the inside of that bogie, lots of plastic gears and everything pretty much soaked in oil. There were wiper pickups on one side for the front and back wheels, and one of those wasn't engaged with the wheel properly.
I removed the wheels and axles, which simply lifted out now. There are the wheels and axles. The wheels are insulated on one side, which would be the side with the wiper pickups. The wheels on the other side of the axles were not insulated, and presumably power was supposed to pass through these wheels to the axles, from the axles to the die-cast chassis of the bogie, and then from there to the main loco die-cast body, and then to the motor. But something clearly wasn't working reliably. With the base and the wheels removed, the whole bogie could simply be slid aside and then lifted out of the chassis. It was just held in place by tabs that ran over the top of tabs in the chassis. The bogie stayed in place during normal running, as with wheels and base fitted, the bogie couldn't move over far enough for the tabs to separate. With the bogie removed, the drive shaft which connected motor and bogie fell out. This drive shaft was just fitted by sliding its ends into tubes on the motor end of the bogie end, with pins on the drive shaft fitting into grooves in those tubes so that turning motion would be transmitted. I removed the bases from both bogies. They were essentially identical. I cleaned the pickups with electrical contact cleaner. I found that the plastic sides of the bogies could be removed by unclipping the tabs that went over the top of the die-cast body. There were actually supposed to be 2 tabs, but on both bogies the upper tab of the plastic side was broken off, so only the bottom tab was still functioning. Here's the inside of one of the bogies with the base wheels and side removed. You can see how the drive shaft will drive the worm via the black connecting tube. There are little brass bearings on the worm. The worm then drives the big gear, and power is passed to all of the wheels via the smaller gears. The plastic gears just run on metal pins cast into the die-cast chassis. Here's the inside of the other bogie. Just the same, but mirrored. I removed all of the gears from both bogies. Everything was really saturated in oil. I cleaned out the bogie chassis with contact cleaner. I also removed the old lubrication from the gears using contact cleaner. I nearly lost one of the worm bearings, as the end bearing can just drop off the shaft, and it did onto the floor. I refitted all of the gears to the bogie chassis. I cleaned the wheels and axles with contact cleaner and a manky brush. When refitting the wheels, you must take care to ensure that all of the insulated wheels go on the side with the wiper pickups. You can clearly see the insulated wheels here, the ones with the black plastic centres. I cleaned the wheels themselves with a bronze brush in a rotary tool to make sure they would actually pick up power from the rails. I re-lubricated the bogie gears with oil and white grease. I tried to apply enough lubrication to prevent anything binding without over-soaking things. I was concerned that too much oil might result in power not being well conducted between the axles and the chassis. I put the plastic sides back on the bogies and slid the bogies back into the main chassis. The drive shafts need to be fitted before the bases are put onto the bogies, as with the bases on, the bogies can't slide over far enough. Necessary, otherwise the drive shafts would just fall out during normal operation. Here's the front drive shaft fitted between motor and bogie. Then, whilst keeping the drive shaft fitted, the wheels need to be put back into place the right way round. And then the base is screwed back onto the bogie. The other end, the back, was actually more tricky to reassemble. The drive shaft kept falling out while I tried to manipulate the bogie, and it was hard to get the wiper pickups to stay inside the wheels. I got both bogies reassembled in place and refitted the body. I tried the loco again on the basement layout. It was still very stoppy-starty, so clearly there was still some problem. I put the chassis up on a wooden block and tested. All 4 wiper pickups now seem to be working, but power to the other side of the motor, which should be passing through the chassis, appeared to be the problem.
Okay, so there are pickups on the front and back wheels of each bogie. Now I've got power connected to the side of the motor that doesn't connect to the pickups, right? And see, when I touch that wheel I get power. Famous last words. When I touch that wheel I get power. When I touch that wheel I get power. When I touch that wheel I get power. So all 4 pickups are working. All 4 pickups are working. What is not working is that power is not getting from the chassis to that other contact, which it needs to be.
The motor terminal at centre here is supposed to get power transmitted through the chassis. The only black wire soldered to that terminal is going to the light bulb, so that's not providing any power. The only other wire soldered to that terminal is a single bare wire, which is then taped to the side of the motor can. I find it hard to believe that Bachmann actually made the model to work this way. I found that power was getting from the chassis to the motor can fine, but that bare wire taped to the can was only making intermittent contact at best. This was the principal source of the running problems with this model. I tried to solder the bare wire to the motor can. The solder didn't want to take much, but I managed to get it to stick by brushing the area with liquid flux. That did result in the model running reliably when power was applied to the wheels. And I ran it on the layout like that and it went round without any problems, but I wasn't really confident that my soldering of the wire to the motor can would hold up. It might work for a while and then come loose, so I decided that I'd better provide a better way for power to get to the motor terminal from the chassis before passing the model back to my friend. As a side issue, it appeared that the little body retention screw was stripped, and it fell out and got lost. I sorted out an appropriate screw, just a little bigger than the original, and tapped it into the hole in the chassis. I figured that I could run a wire from the motor terminal to one of the screws by the flywheel, and that should create a solid connection between the motor terminal and the chassis. I undid the screw to which I wanted to attach the new wire. I found a terminal piece that I thought should work. I checked that the screw would go through the hole in the terminal. I cut a piece of thin wire to about the right length and stripped the ends. I tinned the ends of that wire. I soldered one end of that wire into the terminal piece. I soldered the other end of that wire to the motor terminal. It took a couple of tries, but I did eventually get a good solid connection there. I refitted the screw through the hole in the terminal piece. I rotated the terminal piece a bit to better allow the wire to be tucked in. I re-railed the black engine onto my basement layout for a final running trial.
So, I think I'm about done with this one, unless my friend asks me specifically to do something else. I mean, there are other issues with it. The front, there's a little bit broken off at the front, but I don't, not having the original broken off part, I don't think I could fabricate that. It's an awkwardly, curved piece. And it's not very obvious. See, that's what I'm talking about. One side of that lower front skirt is broken off, and the coupling, whoops, move that out now, there's hardly room to get by. The coupling is something weird that I'm not sure that you can actually couple anything to, but I'm not sure it's some sort of strange American style coupling that I don't even know what it's supposed to look like, so I'm not sure whether it's intact. It's pretty much definitely not the original coupling, it's crudely glued on to that back bogie. But not an easy fix, and I don't know whether he wants to do anything different, so let's just run this now after I've... it actually ran okay before I put that latest wire on, but I just didn't trust that wire. So I've got the Tech 2 here, We'll put it up to 50% and off he goes. Because he's got so much weight and a massive flywheel and everything, he pulls away a little slowly, and then when you cut the power he draws to a halt slowly. So that's just below 50%, about 45% on the Tech 2 controller. And the Tech 2 controller has built-in meters for voltage and current, so let me see if we can see what he's drawing. About 9 volts. Yeah, about 9 volts, about 400 milliamps. 400 milliamps seems a bit high, but, you know, for that massive can motor, that's probably what it's going to take. I don't think you're going to get the voltage down much beyond that with that motor. Okay, I'm going to cut the power as I come up here, and you'll see what I mean about how it drifts. Cut! See, I actually cut the power when I said cut, and it drifted forward more than I thought. I think I told my friend it drifted forward 6 inches or so. It actually drifts forward, a couple of its own lengths, because I cut the power on that straight there, and it's drifted right into the level crossing. Anyway, I'm relatively pleased. I think we've fixed that as much as I can fix it, and we'll move on to looking at the other one, the red one, now.
With the black one basically done, I moved on to working on the red one, which proved to be more of a headache than I was expecting. The only screws visible on the bottom were the little ones holding on the couplings. There were no screws at all on the top of the body. There were clips on the side of the chassis engaged in slots in the body. Not a great way of attaching body and chassis, especially in this rather crude way. It was necessary to remove the front coupling, as the coupling itself went through a slot in the front skirt. The coupling was held on by a tiny screw. I'm not familiar with this style of coupling, and I don't even know what they're called. I used toothpicks to help me ease the body away from the chassis clips. In this case, the body came off completely. There was a front light, but it stayed attached to the chassis. This was a much simpler model than the black one. Only the back bogie was driven by a small Ringfield type motor. Pretty much everything was plastic, and the weight came almost entirely from metal plates screwed onto the centre of the chassis. Here's a close-up of the motor with rather a cat's cradle of wires. There was one wire hanging loose over the front of the chassis here. Checking how things were connected, it seemed that the loose wire was intended to be connected to the wiper pickups on that side. I wasn't clear how to remove the motor bogie. Since this screw on the side was about the only likely thing that I could see, I undid that screw. That allowed me to remove this little block from the face of the motor. And with that block removed, I was able to wiggle the motor bogie down out of the chassis. I've never actually seen a Ringfield motor this small. I wanted to resolder the loose wire. I checked again to make sure where that wire was supposed to be getting its power. It appeared to be intended to take power from the side, which is at top here. I resoldered that wire to the pickups on that side. I managed to burn my thumb in the process, as it was rather difficult to get in there. I did use liquid flux on the pickup to make a better solder connection. I tried the power, and the pickups on that side of the back bogie did now work. I refitted the bogie into the chassis. I didn't disassemble the motor and gears at this point, as the engine had seemed to be running okay on my initial running trial. I screwed the block back into place on the motor, holding that bogie in place. I lubricated the axles and the motor bearing. I reclipped the body to the chassis and refitted the front coupling and screwed it on, fitting its little plastic spring into place. I tried the red engine on the layout again. I was rather disappointed with the result.
Well, I really don't know about this one. Honestly, it almost seems to be running worse now than before I disassembled it, which I don't understand because I can't see what I would have done that would have... I mean, it clearly hesitates over that back point. Well, you couldn't see it very clearly then, but it does tend to. Now, its pickup arrangements, even with that back pickup resolder, are not ideal, yeah. But... now this is using less amps but more voltage than the other one. So I'm looking, I've got that up to about 11 volts and it's drawing, sorry, you can, where are the meters? I'm going to show you the meters. Yeah, well it wiggles as it goes over that point because it can't quite find it. It's about 11 volts and about just over 200 milliamps. I don't know, and it's a bit noisy as well, but I'm very dubious about taking that little Ringfield motor apart. I mean, that would be the other thing to do, of course, is to take that Ringfield motor completely apart, and it could be done. It's a small Ringfield motor for such a large engine. Well, that's the only way I'm going to be able to, I would be able to get into the gearbox and things. Honestly, I didn't think it needed it because it seems to be running fine before. I'm not that thrilled with the way it's running now. I mean, it's not too bad, but... just over 50% on that controller. I don't know. Now this, of course, if I cut the power on this one, you'll see it'll just stop dead because it stops pretty much dead because it has no flywheel or anything, unlike the old one. It's just a tiny Ringfield motor, so as soon as the power's cut, it just stops.
I got the model back onto the bench and took the motor bogie out again. This time another loose wire came to my attention. I tried, and it appeared that this second loose wire was supposed to be attached to the wiper pickups on the other side of the bogie. I undid the screws holding on the brush retainers. Someone had been fairly free with the red Loctite here. I held the brush retainers down as I removed the screws, as the little springs can easily pop out and get lost. I removed both brush retainers and removed the brushes and springs. Everything appeared to be in okay condition. There were two small screws at the bottom of the motor faceplate, and I undid these. It wasn't possible to take off the faceplate with the motor fitted into the bogie base. The top part was held into the base by clips on the ends. I pried one of the end clips out of its rectangular hole in the base, and so was able to remove the motor assembly from the bogie base. Here's the motor assembly, with all of the gears and wheels with the bogie base removed. Here you can see all of the gears inside the bogie. There were wiper pickups on both sides, but one on the lower side here was not behind the wheel. I lifted out the wheels with their axles. Here you can see the remaining gears and the pickups, with only one side currently having a wire attached, by me just recently. Now I was able to remove the motor faceplate, exposing the armature and all of the gears. This motor has two small curved magnets, one on each side, rather than a single circular magnet, as is more normal with Ringfield motors. I removed all of the plastic gears from the chassis. I removed the armature from the motor case. The commutator was perhaps a little scratched, but it didn't look in terribly bad shape. Nevertheless, when I cleaned the commutator with T-cut, quite a bit of dirt came off. I put the armature and gears back in place and lubricated with gear oil. I refitted the motor faceplate and did up the 2 small screws. I refitted the wheels, oiling their gears and pivot points a bit. I soldered the loose wire to the wiper pickups on the other side, helping with some liquid flux. I screwed the brush retainers back into place, taking great care to trap the springs properly under the ends and to keep them there until the screw was done up. It had really helped to have 3 hands sometimes for jobs like this. With the motor reassembled, I clipped the base of the bogie back on. Before proceeding with further assembly, I checked that the motor was working okay after reassembly, and that power could now be transmitted through any of the wheels, with the pickup wires now reattached. I pushed the motor bogie back into the main chassis, and screwed the block back onto the face to hold it in place. I tested with power 1 more time. Everything seemed to be okay. I decided to try with just the chassis on the layout, as I didn't want to take the body on and off more than I could help, given the rather nasty clip-on arrangement. This was perhaps a bad idea, as the chassis alone didn't run all that well.
Well, this is just the chassis without the body of the red one going round. I have to admit, I'm getting a little bit fed up with this one now, because I keep doing work on it and it doesn't really get much better. I don't know whether there's much can be done. I have taken all the gears out. Oh, that didn't sound healthy, did it? What's it doing? I don't know. I mean, I keep working on it and it really doesn't get better. I don't know, is the track a bit dirty there? I don't know. I've had all the years out and everything. That's running, what are you looking at on the meters there? About 10 volts, about 200 milliamps, which is not unreasonable. But it's noisy, but you know, maybe this kind of ring-filled motor's always going to be noisy, I don't know. I can't say I'm feeling great confidence in this engine, but I don't know whether I can get it to run any better than this. It's got better pickup now, it's now got pickup, and now it's got stuck at the back of the layout where it's a pain in the behind to retrieve it. Well, this is about as good as I can do with this one. I've about had it with it. It's a bit noisy. It occasionally derails, but seems to be better at not derailing when it's got the body in. For some reason, trying to run the chassis without the body, it really doesn't seem to like. Can't see why, but there's not a weight issue, really. There's hardly any weight in the body. But it's not running too badly now. And I think that's about the best I can do. What we're looking at there, 10 volts, yeah, 10 volts, 200 milliamps, that's about what we were looking at. It's a little quieter, I can't get it any quieter, I don't think. And it does now pick up from the back bogie, because I've resoldered the wires for both sides on the back bogie, and that's it. So we'll just stop it here. And I think that's it, you know. I've pretty much done with these, because I don't think I can get this one any better than that.